Hello, I'm ToyCat, and welcome back to the second channel geography video. Today I wanted to talk about territorial expansion, an idea which might seem ridiculous when you're talking about your own country, because how is your country going to expand? Is it going to make more land, or is it going to invade their neighbors? No, it's not going to do that, because that would be rude. However, it wasn't that recently that there was a lot of unclaimed land in the world, which meant that if you wanted to, you could build the roads, and you could get your people there, and you could get international recognition, then you could just expand your country. This is what happened with Russia. It started in the west and slowly expanded east until it became the biggest country on the planet Earth by land area, and a similar thing happened in the New World where Europeans obviously arrived from the east and then they slowly went west. Indeed, that is the founding myth of the United States about the slow movement of people to the west of the country. However, there is a little bit of misleadingness about this. It also applies to Canada, and there's a great example for Canada, because although this country did start in the east with the Maritimes and then Ontario and Quebec, the Canadas, an interesting fact is you might expect that the next province would have been Manitoba, and then Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. The slow westward expansion of the country worked the same way, right? But an interesting fact is this isn't true, because there was a phase where British Columbia existed, but Saskatchewan, Alberta, and most of Manitoba did not. This is absolutely fascinating if you ask me. Also, look, Ontario's tiny, how sad. But this is absolutely fascinating on so many levels, and it's a fact backed up by the government of Canada, who, by the way, have the historical boundaries of their country on their website, something every country should do, where they show that this is in fact true. British Columbia became a province of Canada long before any of the center ones. You can see it takes a very long time until these boundaries start to actually come together, and this is absolutely a fascinating fact in my opinion. There are so many countries which slowly expanded in a direction that isn't obvious when you look at them on a map, and so today I wanted to talk about counterintuitive territorial expansion. Right after I go into a quick word from the sponsor. This video was brought to you by HelloFresh, and this isn't going to be your usual sponsorship pitch. This is a service I have used and I will like, and I actually am going to just talk to you about it in the way that I personally have enjoyed it, because I think it has been good for me for saving money, for eating better, and stressing less. It does a perfect combination of those three things. You just go on the website, you get a great discount for clicking the link in the description, and you can tell them whether you want meat, veggies, family friendly, fit, wholesome, whatever it is that you want from a meal planning box, HelloFresh can sort out for you in the quantity and number of people that you actually want. This is really, really cool, and honestly, as someone who has lived in the United States, I found it so stressful, the idea of going to the grocery store once every 2 weeks and being like, yes, I know what I will eat in 2 weeks, and I know the exact ingredients to get it, and I'll get them in the right quantity, and I'll just hope in 2 weeks that I remember, and then if you do, you gotta exactly make what you 2 weeks ago wanted. It's terrible, I hate the system, and it's much more fun to go to HelloFresh, and if you do so, just as a quick heads up, you'll get free dessert for life for using my link in the description. That's the fun thing. I love dessert, and getting it one time, that would be nice. Free dessert for life just if you sign up. That's a nice promo in my opinion, and it's one of the reasons I think you should check them out. I don't think that meal planning is a lot of fun, and I assume that you don't as well. I end up defaulting to something unhealthy if I go to the supermarket and try to deal with it there. So instead, how about you use HelloFresh, and if you use my link or this QR code, in fact, wait, I'll put the QR code over the United States because that's where it's valid for, then you can get yourself a really, really good deal, including the great discount, but also free dessert for life. Thank you to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video, and if you do check this out, I cannot iterate enough, it really would help out the channel. But for now, let's quickly move back into the United States. I want to quickly, I thank HelloFresh. Let's thank the United States for existing, for allowing this weird piece of information to kind of come to me, because this is the country which really reiterates the idea of East is new, East is old, and West is new the most, in my opinion, because when you look anywhere on the East, it starts to look a couple of 100 years old. You pick a random spot around here, and it's like, yeah, you can see the age of this. They're making their houses out of wood, like that's a real normal thing to do. And then you move over to the West, and you can see basically anywhere. I lived in Las Vegas for a little bit. This is where I was ordering the HelloFresh, funnily enough. But you can see anything looking around here. I think I picked casinos, which is a bad example. But basically anywhere around here, it looks like it's new, or at least in the last 40 or 50 years, for basically everything. And although some of those design decisions are bad, the point is to say that the West looks newer, and so you wouldn't be wrong for assuming that like British Columbia and California and all of this stuff came later. But the reason that it didn't is because of the fun, counterintuitive fact that the oceans are the world's best resource, else, and therefore the United States was a very long way from making roads to get to some of these crazy high mountain peaks in the middle here. The same is true for Canada. But while these countries were trying to get to the middle, it was very easy to get out to California, to get out to British Columbia, because you could just go all the way around. Looking today, it seems insane you would go all the way around, and that's why no people do it. It's just we value our time too much. But if you're trying to get goods somewhere, the cheapest way still sometimes can be to do that, because who wants to spend dozens of hours on a railroad, or again, dozens of hours on the back of someone's truck, multiple days, I believe, if like someone driving a lorry at interstate speeds across America is what it takes to cross this continent. And so shipping actually makes some sense, and at one point was the only way to go from east to west until the two sides were connected. This is again, incredibly intriguing fact that reveals how we know some things about the world that are just a little bit wrong. That's where I want to kind of take this video, because another fact about the world which often comes up, actually, one last point, every country needs to do what Canada does. I'm going to reiterate this again. This is a really cool feature. If you want to look up how Canada slowly expanded, you can see how they rearranged and moved the country and actively see what I was talking about there. But what you can also see, interestingly, by looking at Google is China. Google Maps works really well in China. There are no issues whatsoever. You won't ever find that roads are misaligned, or that there's no street view, or that businesses don't work correctly. None of that has ever happened, which is really, really good to know. And one of the interesting things about China is that when you look at it on a map, you might assume from the most recent Western news that we hear about it, that like, yeah, China is a country which has been expanding more recently than not. They went through that big period, the Great Leap Forward, and that must have led them to new places. I mean, obviously we know about the annexation of Tibet and Xinjiang. Sorry, wait, one sec. The peaceful liberation of Tibet. My bad. But everyone knows about the peaceful liberation of Tibet by the People's Republic of China, and that's wrong title for this Wikipedia article. But the interesting thing is that this is not to say that China is at its greatest territorial extent, and in fact it expanded in different places first. So if we go and we look at a map of the world, let's say from, I don't know, like 1900, something interesting that you'll find is that, oh yeah, there is some parts of the territory right now which do, parts of their current territory which they don't have, but there are far more places which they do own, kind of intriguingly making the country look like this. Also, there were some other ports which, as well as Hong Kong, which everyone knows about, there were some other ports which belong to Germany, as you can see, some other ports that belong to France, interestingly, and there's a lot of interesting things about the country, but the country expanded kind of non-uniformly. At different points in its history, China has gone all sorts of different ways, and at this point, it controlled all of Mongolia, it looks like, which I think is absolutely fascinating, but it didn't control some of what you might nowadays see as China, because that was under control of the Russian Empire instead. This is, again, if you look at Russia right here, you can see that even though Russia is huge today, it has been even huger at many points in the past. There are many, territorial disputes they kind of had to settle for. But one of the interesting things is this territory with China, which they nicely have lined up here. But this means that China has a huge eastern flank, which just didn't exist in its past. It has Mongolia, which it doesn't have Mongolia anymore, I should say. And also, it just has a couple of territories and a messy border over here. Most of the land which came from what is nowadays India and Pakistan, which I think is a very compelling case for how China is the most bizarre country on the planet, because every other country that's like, oh yeah, Germany grew and it shrunk, and or like, you could say like Prussia, I guess maybe, it grew, it shrunk, and it merged, and it did all these sorts of things. When you look at China, it's like, yeah, there are lots of individual peoples that fall apart, and they get together and they make a dynasty, and then it goes and then it falls apart. China has the most compelling story of that, and that is one of the reasons why they are so strict about their opinions on various things. So if we take a quick aside to talk about another example, let's say the third example today, let's talk about Tuvalu. I feel like we have to come to the Pacific, and every time we mention this, say there are too many countries here, and that seems like a crazy, like, pro-colonialist thing to say, like, wow, if people want to govern themselves, so I can't let them govern themselves, well, let me govern myself. No, we obviously agree there is a minimum size that people should have before self-governance makes sense, a minimum cultural difference, if not that, I think we could say. And so one of the interesting things about the South Pacific are how many countries were created here, basically, and an interesting one is the fact that Tuvalu over here, most famous for their .tv domains, interestingly used to be part of Kiribati, which, I mean, the Kiribati is one of my favorite countries. Look at the name of their cities. We got Poland, we got Paris, we got London, Banana is where their international airport is. Every time I remember banana, I go through a big stretch of joy, and I'm glad that we could bring it up in this video. But yeah, interestingly, all of these territories used to be part of the same thing. It was called the British West Pacific Territories, and honestly, when they were, if they had stayed together, their cultural influence on the world might be bigger to this day. Now there are just a bunch of like, oh yeah, that's technically a countries that exist in the area, but because of the, if you're curious, it's the Special Committee into Colonization. There was a UN committee basically put together to say people should rule themselves. A really good idea, but they didn't fully complete the job, partially because of all these UK territories. I'll take blame for those. And it makes it look like, wow, the UK, the US, France, and a little bit of New Zealand are basically holding on to these countries against their will. But actually, these are just the countries which are, which the governments admit are like, yeah, we're governing for them for some reason. All of the countries which aren't on there are like, well, China blocks the admission of all of the countries they rule against their will because they say that we get to control them. It's their territory. And Indonesia says, well, that's silly. We control this land. It's, they want us to control them. It's great. And Russia has to have, 26 different disputed colonial countries. Okay, well, that's a lot of those, huh? And that's kind of fun. And also Puerto Rico, as well as the British Indian Territory. But the point is to say that actually, where you draw the line between colony and part of a country's territory is entirely down to what you feel. Why does the United States own, for example, Hawaii? It's a full state, but it's weird. And Alaska is also kind of weird. Why does Russia own this territory over there? How is this not considered a territory? Seriously, when you look around some of these places, it's like, what is happening here? Let's look around a random street view. It's like, is this Russia? I mean, technically speaking, it's Russia, but is it really Russia, or is it a colony of Russia? I think we generally go with the argument that if it's contiguously connected, it can't be a colony, but then why is Russia allowed to own this land right here? This is the most ridiculous Russian exclave. The same is true for basically anything in the world which isn't attached. You can make a really good argument for why it is ridiculous, and that is why, if you come and you look over here, if we just were to look at this for a second and finish this canal from there to there, we would make China's ownership of Hong Kong look ridiculous. And so I'm just saying, if anyone in Hong Kong feels like digging a canal, it might be your way to get out of the current issues you're going through. Speaking of current issues, I think I have to stay somewhat on track for this video. Let's talk about more of a cultural one, because another example of territorial expansion, we use governments when we talk about territory expansion. Like, what is it to say that someone who lives in Inverness has anything in common with someone who lives in Swansea? They are two parts of the same country in the real sense of the word, not the British sense of the word. I hate the fact that in the UK we act like our sub-territorial units are called countries, and we're like, yeah, England is just as much a country as like Austria is. It's like, that's ridiculous. Let's stop being ridiculous. Let's stop confusing the world, or maybe we should confuse the world for fun. But the interesting point here is to say that lots of we talk about countries when we talk about these things. Man, that was such a tangent. I need to stay focused some amount. And so let's talk just briefly here about the idea that actually before national governments were the big way to have a big expansionary force, religion was instead, and the religion most people see as expanding the most today is probably this one. Do you know what it is by looking at the map? If you don't, you might be able to work out some of the reasons why a lot of countries in the region don't like this one white country based on it. There's just a theory right there. I don't know for sure. Although you'd figure they'd also hate this white country over here. I don't know. I imagine things are going really well in Georgia, so maybe that's entirely inaccurate. But one of the important things here is to say, wait, let me get some more engagement bait. Do you know why it is that this white country over here, this little island, do you know why its neighbors don't like it very much? Give me a... There we go. I've double engagement baited people now. I'm going to get all the comments. So now that I've done that, I'm going to quickly take a brief moment to say that this is a map of the Islamic world, and you might assume that this is the Islamic world at its peak. Look at the countries it controls. You can't even see one because it's behind me. All of Indonesia and Malaysia. It's crazy how much of the world is Islamic, or Muslim, if you will. And so you might assume this is the greatest territorial extent they've ever had, but interestingly, they were much further into Europe, intriguingly, even including basically all of Spain. This is the Caliphate of Cordoba, and it was it was the point where Spain went to Islam. Surprisingly recently, it was, again, 1,000 years ago, surprisingly recently by European standards, but this was an interesting point that, like, yeah, all of the Islamic world expanded out from here, but it has been expanding in weird directions. Some of them are fairly intuitive, but the fact that it stopped hard north before reaching Europe, outside of like Albania and Bosnia, it kind of stopped over there, but kind of has been going to the south massively, North Africa in particular. There is a very counterintuitive spread to these cultural phenomenons, and I think that is fascinating. But just in case that, you know, but in case you don't like talking about religion, in case it's just a bit too much for you, let's instead have a little side segment, which is, where is Toycat going next? You know, one of the reasons I like looking at Google Maps is because I like imagining going places. And one of the cool things about this channel is I have weird excuses to go to places and maybe share it with you. And one of those is going to be Jordan. I did not realize, every time I tell someone I'm going to Jordan, they're like, is that a good idea, man? Is it safe there? And I'm like, why would Jordan not be safe? And so this is me being a bad map guy, because I'm like, oh, I see why it wouldn't be safe. So my plan is to go and float in the Dead Sea, which I can see why that would feel even less safe. But yeah, there is a big old Dead Sea over here, and I think that's fun passing. But this is Jordan, one of the most interestingly shaped countries, by the way, and also a country which is included in this map over here. So yeah, there's a fun fact for you. Speaking of fun facts, one of my favorite pages on Wikipedia, has to be said, I really love when Wikipedia has a page that shows the territorial annexation, or the territorial evolution of a place. And so if I show you Australia's, you can see that it starts being like region claimed by Great Britain as the colony of New South Wales. You can see that Australia has done a similar thing to China, where it really got to its biggest territorial extent basically immediately. You can see like, okay, after 1829, it reached the modern day Australia. But it then kept on expanding and shrinking and expanding and shrinking because more colonies were added to its governance, etc. Right. So here is all of New Zealand. It's part of New South Wales, then it becomes its own colony. And then, okay, we got to separate it out because obviously New Zealand's its own colony. Then New South Wales loses some territory and then it gets merged back in for some reason. But like in a slight, I don't know why it existed with a weird exclave over there, but they went back and then they said, nah, let's make Tasmania. And then they take some colonies. And if you look at the actual expansion of the country, they take Papua New Guinea for a bit, and then okay, no, we're back to just Australia, and then no, we're going back to the territory of Papua, and then we're going, okay, it's in Australia, we're going to take some new lands, we're going to make some new divisions, and then you know what, actually we'll have Antarctica too while we're at this, and then you know what, actually we're going to take all these mandates, but then they're going to have to go being independent because they're, you know, they're part, the decolonization committee says that we're not allowed to own these islands, but even though we have a real strong commercial interest in the islands, we're not going to think about it too much. And then wow, what do you know, Australia that we know it today, a country that went through so much to basically go from like, yeah, this is Australia, there's basically 3 parts of it, to this is Australia, there's basically 3 parts of it, New South Wales, Victoria, and the west coast over here, and then also a couple of other parts that some people might care about. I've also heard some people live on Tasmania. I've yet to hear confirmed reports, but I hear, I've heard the vague idea that you might find a person here or there at the local Woolworths. We'll have to confirm that in person sometime. But yeah, with that said, yeah, look at this. This is interesting. Does this look like New World to you, Internet? It's interesting because to me, I look at this and I feel like, yeah, I'm in like a weird part of the UK in a way that you don't get when you look at Canada or the United States. Like, this doesn't look new to me, but it statistically must be, right? I mean, if we look at the same street just from 2008, oh, it's the same street, just darker. Has nothing changed in Tasmania in these years? I mean, they cut down this hedge. There was a very big hedge there, and there's not anymore. And the that store there, that I'm guessing Target. No, it's just a blurry logo. It got a bit nicer. So that's kind of cool, I guess. Yeah, look at that. Look how much nicer this store is now. So that is what has changed in Tasmania. That's nice. That's an update. I guess I should go look at their capital, to be fair. You know, this is the capital of Tasmania. If you're born on Tasmania, your life is ruined because this is the closest thing you know to a city. Oh, it actually looks nice. It reminds me of Northern Ireland, weirdly. Does anyone else see that? It feels like I'm in Belfast right now. Speaking of being in Belfast, though, I hope you've enjoyed this video. In case you are curious, I have... yeah, if anyone is, I am going to Jordan, it's a real thing. I would like to know if anyone has any fun things that they know about the country. Because, yeah, it is going to be my first time there. It'll be my 51st country to add to my little map. I know being this into tracking it is weird, but I really am, I love that I'll have a new segment of the world, and eventually I'll get to South America, chat. I've arguably been to South America already, but I'm gonna really go to South America It's going to be fun. Anyway, this video has gone a little bit off course, so thank you very much for watching it. I hope you enjoyed. Did you enjoy the old style, or do you like the new style a little bit more? I'll be honest with you, I kind of like the idea of keeping both as almost separate series here, and so Mondays are when you'll see either the main channel big series questions, you can see that on Mondays, or shorts related to it, and I think the rest of the week, just randomly when we want to do stuff, we can still have the fun side of this channel too. Let me know if that sounds good to you, because if it doesn't, then second channel don't care. But for real, I do want to say, if you have enjoyed this video and you do enjoy the channel, please do check out HelloFresh. This isn't just like I want them to look good, I want me to look good in front of them, although that's true too, but there is a huge incentive, and basically, it would be very good. One of the best things you can do to support the channel on a direct level is just to sign up for a HelloFresh box. Even if you're on the fence about it, just give it one try. That's all you gotta do, and it would help this channel out a bunch. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you all enjoyed, because I'll see you next time. From actually a country that's got an airport in a different country. It'll be fun. Bye.